Pre-War Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C. Now, we've been going through the European crisis. We're going to give the full European emergency program in just a minute. Let's switch back to the United States. We have an interesting guest to talk to. This past week, the Ohio referendum, this was the big result of the Tuesday elections, 61-39, New Deal America voted down the reactionary program, the thing they all believe in. Kasich, Ron Paul, every Republican, smash the unions, and America says no by 61-39. It is New Deal America. And on the other side, and we'll talk about this later too, Jefferson County, Alabama, bankrupt after Harrisburg, Vallejo, California, many other places, the culprit credit default swaps in this case, credit default swaps. Sherry Hunkala didn't make it. She got about 7% of the vote. That's quite an achievement in any case. The Democratic Party machine delivered for the candidate Williams. So anyway, she at least put that on the map. But let's go now to Dan, our correspondent Dan, who's going to give us an update on the primary Obama Now action and any other topics that he thinks are of critical importance. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you, Webster. And I think what you're pointing out in Ohio is something for people to remember in the context of a primary challenge to Obama. By nearly a 2-1 margin, we saw voters come out and soundly reject stripping union rights away from state workers. It was about 61% of people. That is a very clear, resounding majority.
That's
and
a
yet
landslide.
Yet in the state of Ohio, Obama's running in the low 40s at best. And I think that's where we see the disparity. When you have a Wall Street Democrat who has stabbed unions in the back, who has stabbed working people in the back, and who works for the derivatives mongers and the hedge fund hyenas, this is why you have this 20% gap. And what this means is there is a tremendous thirst for real progressive leadership and not this facsimile that we have with Obama. So what we're trying to do with primary Obama Now is to tell people, look, the New Hampshire primary filing deadline has passed. The Iowa deadline has passed. That passed on November. That has come and gone. But remember the way primaries are structured. The way Obama was able to do this was by picking up small little caucuses in places like Montana, went to places like Colorado, and picked it up piece by piece. The filing deadlines in places like California, that's January 6th, Texas, December 12th. Ohio, that's not till March. So in the states where the real delegates are going to be picked up for a convention challenge, where someone can actually start aggregating delegates to present a real challenge, we have not jumped that shark yet. We have not passed the real deadlines that are going to matter here. So I want to tell people this fight continues, and I think people still need to go out there and promote the site, primaryobamanow.com. I continue to try to get in touch with people at The Nation magazine, left bloggers like Glenn Greenwald. I've emailed, I've tweeted at them. I really cannot get a response from people. So what we're running into is the demoralized, the foundation-funded, the infiltrated portions of the left liberals who are not even willing to flirt with the idea of a primary challenge to Obama. So we really need to take it to them here. And so get on the website, primaryobamanow.com. Something I want to bring up is that people have been recommending Ron Paul as a candidate, and this is just something I want to bring up. And I'm going to be writing an article, I'm actually working on it now, on an actuarial analysis of how many people would be killed by Ron Paul's economic plan. What we find is that people are very much attracted to Ron Paul because of his anti-war positions and his demagogy on the Federal Reserve. They think of him as a populist because of his positions on civil liberties. But when you actually look at the economic plan he's put out, Webster, you talked about this on last week's show. I just want to bring up some quick numbers for people. The amount of Americans on Medicaid, 50 million. The amount of children on Medicaid or S-CHIP program, 40 million. Amount of Americans receiving Medicare, 48 million. Amount of Social Security beneficiaries.
Why don't you slow down? I think these are important figures. Maybe you start again and just take it a little bit slower. I'd like to get those stats.
Absolutely. So let me put it to you this way. The Ron Paul plan is austerity on steroids on human growth hormone. It is Romney's plan. It is Perry's plan. It is Herman Cain's plan on steroids. It is much more monstrous, much more austere. He's planning to cut $1 trillion in the first year. And the way he's planning to do this is by offering tremendous cuts or block granting to the programs that I'm about to outline here. Block granting would mean that instead of the federal government paying for these programs, they would give a block grant of money to the states who could then handle the Medicare or Medicaid rather money as they see fit. What that means is that in states like California, New York, Ohio, Wisconsin, where you have these austerity movements where the governors are saying basically we're going to do with the money what we want, you would have tremendous cuts to these programs. And what I'm trying to outline with these numbers here are the massive amount of Americans, we're talking at least 1/5 of the country, that depend on these programs to live, to survive, to get health care. This is life and death. This isn't an entitlement. This is the difference between living and dying. So let me just, I'll more slowly here outline these numbers. The amount of Americans in total receiving Medicaid coverage. Now, Medicaid is insurance for the poor and for children, but also for elderly people on hospice care who need long-term care for their ailments. 50 million people on Medicaid.
1 in 6 right there, or 1 in 7 at most.
Now, of that number, when you include S-CHIP, which is specifically insurance for poor children, that's roughly 5.6 to 7 million children at any given time. The amount of children in total, though, covered by Medicaid and S-CHIP is 40 million. Now, also remember that 7.3 million children are still uninsured. Ron Paul's response to that is to say, good luck with that. The free market will deal with that. You can go out to the free market, and if you can afford...
It hasn't. Why would
exactly.
it now?
And that's why you have 45 million uninsured people, is because the free market doesn't work. And healthcare, we can't look at this like a commodity. You can't look at it like buying a Dodge Challenger. It's not a product that you buy and sell. This is, again, the difference between being a third world hellhole and being a real industrialized country where we take care of our citizens. The amount of recipients of Medicare, now this is care for people aged 65 and older, 48 million. The amount of people receiving Social Security benefits. Now, this is, again, incredibly important because this is not just for the disabled, but this is for people who are retired and need this money to eat. They need this money to pay for their food and for their medicine and for their rent. That is 60 million people. Now, Ron Paul wants to allow young workers to opt out of Social Security, and he presents this as some sort of economic libertarian freedom. What that will do is drastically drain the resources for Social Security. It's much in the way that Obama has instituted this payroll tax cut and said that, it's for the workers. What this means is that you are draining the ability of Social Security to survive as a program, and you're essentially privatizing it. And that's the goal here, is to destroy what remains of the New Deal and Great Society. I've got more numbers here. The amount of people on WIC, which is Women, Infants, and Children program for high-protein meals for expectant mothers, 9.17 million enrolled in WIC. Number of children on Head Start, Education for the Poor, 1 million. Here's the staggering number.
And that 1 million should be much bigger. That reflects not the demand, but that's the funding that it's got.
Right, and this is on a very underfunded program.
Lots of people want it, can't get it.
Now, this is what's amazing here. I've got a quote from the press report about the Ron Paul program. The plan would freeze spending for Medicaid and a few other programs like the Child Nutrition Program, changing them into block grants for the states, as I said. Listen to this number. More than 31 million children participate in the National School Lunch Program. So Ron Paul, rather than go for a tax on derivatives, rather than attack the real problem and tax millionaires, billionaires, hedge funds, and derivatives mongers, Ron Paul's response is, those 31 million children who receive school lunches, you have to take the cut. This is monstrous, and I want to tell to the listeners here, when Tarpley uses the phrase genocide, a lot of you may think that that's hyperbole. Again, this is the difference between life and death. This is when you have families who are at the poverty level, when you have an unemployment rate, a real unemployment rate that's above 20%. Cutting these programs mean people will either be turned into homeless or they will literally starve. That's when we're turning into India. That's when we're turning into the third world. And when Ron Paul voted to not extend unemployment benefits for people. I hear we're coming up at the break. Tarpley, you want to hold me over, or should I just...
Just a couple of minutes, yeah. We should mention food stamps. I think it's 46 million on that, right? Back in a minute on World Crisis Radio.